Hello and welcome to Football League World's Weekend Review. My name's Ned Holmes. I'm joined by my colleagues George Harbey and Marcus Sally. How are you doing this morning, George?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. Yeah, good to have a full fixture list back over the weekend to reflect on. So, look forward to it.
And how about you, Marcus? Obviously, fixtures were back, but wasn't the greatest of weekends for your boys, Charlton.
No, not the best. I think it's definitely healthy to get some things off your chest and reflect on things like this. But no, I'm very good. How are you today, Ned?
Yeah, good. Thanks, mate. You know, an exciting weekend of football after an international break that sort of seemed to drag on. So we've got 7 games that we're looking at today, and we're going to start with the Championship. But before that, just a reminder for everyone to sort of like and subscribe Football League World TV on YouTube, because that really will boost us. So moving then to the Championship first. We'll start in South Wales in Sunday's game between Swansea City and Cardiff City. It was the Jamie Patterson show, really. He hammered in a sort of curling strike just at the half-hour mark, and then sort of created the goals for Joel Perreault and Jake Bidwell. Coming to you, George. Jamie Patterson, the star of the show, really, and looking like perhaps Swansea's signing in the summer.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I thought when he got released by Bristol City at the end of his contract, I thought that was a bit of a tough decision for him. And obviously, he picked up a lot of injuries last year, as you know, Ned. I think he only made 22 appearances in the end in all competitions, scored 4 goals. But at 29, in his peak almost, or is entering his prime years, it was a bit of a dodgy decision, really. But obviously, Swansea was linked with a lot of big clubs, I think Forest and Birmingham among those in for him. But no, what a coup for Swansea, and he's paying dividends so far. I think it's 4 goals and 3 assists. Obviously, a goal and 2 assists at the weekend. It was fantastic, and really strikes me as well as a Russell Martin type of player. You look at the players he had at MK Dons, and I know they're of lesser quality, but obviously Scott Fraser did well in that number 10 role behind the striker. He brought in Scott Twine, who he didn't obviously play much under Martin of the timing of his arrival, but another player like Patterson who can pick up spaces in the final third behind the striker, drift wide if needs be. So no, a fantastic sign on the free, and it's he's always been a quality player. It's all about getting him fit, and he's fit now, and he's producing the goods.
Absolutely. Marcus, coming to you then on Swansea, it's obviously there's been a sort of teething period for Russell Martin since his arrival, which I guess came sort of late in the summer. That was expected, given he's got a very unique ideology and sort of style of play. But was this the first result when we really saw things finally click for Russell Martin?
Potentially, yeah. It's definitely going to be a huge boost, obviously, getting the fans on side with a big derby win. I think Swansea defensively have definitely come on a lot, maybe before the attackers sort of followed suit. We saw the troubles had at the start of the season, Stephen Bender in goal and getting pressed high up and losing the ball. I think they've really got to grips with the basics of that, and they're starting to reap the rewards in the final third. Maybe that's how it was always going to start. Martin maybe just focusing on making sure they're hard to beat first while keeping the ball, obviously, as he loves to do. And yeah, reaping the rewards. I think some of the goals were, Jamie Patterson's not going to score a screamer like that every game. He absolutely loved it, didn't he? Goading at some of the Cardiff City fans afterwards as well. There was an air of maybe an offside on Joel Perreault's goal as well, but the third goal was class from Swansea. So yeah, it's definitely starting to click. This will give them so much belief, even though Cardiff are 20th in the table. That won't matter to Swansea. It's still Cardiff. It's still their local rivals. So, yeah, it's a huge win, and I'm sure Martin will be hoping to sort of ride a new wave after that brilliant 3-0 win.
Absolutely. And you sort of touched on it there. Stephen Bender was someone that I guess a lot of neutral fans particularly were sort of laughing at him, sort of trying to adapt to a sort of passing out the back system, but a huge save early on to deny Ryan Giles. And that could have really changed the sort of how the game played out. Moving on to Cardiff, George, can Mick McCarthy bounce back from this? 2 games inside the next week, give him a chance to do that, but things are looking pretty dire for him, aren't they?
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I'm not quite sure what they're waiting for. I thought, to be fair, they might have done it in the international break after 2 heavy defeats. That gives 2 weeks for a new boss to potentially come in and, I said 2 weeks to work with his new players. But I think they gave him obviously yesterday to try and turn it around. And you look at his game plan yesterday. I mean, look at the back 5. It was technically 5 centre backs. You obviously look at Flint Morrison and Nelson, but then you've got McGuinness who played right back, and then Kieran Brown who can play left wing back or centre back. So it wasn't. I don't get what he was trying to achieve, because what they did achieve was, playing Swansea's hands. Swansea, I think, had about 74% of the ball, and we touched on Martin's style of play. Likes to get on the ball, likes his team to play out from the back. So I know they're threatened from a couple of set pieces, but I mean, that's not sustainable. You can't go into a game and think, right, we'll try and nick one here. It's almost like we're just trying to play for a point. So, I mean, it doesn't get much easier, does it? Fulham away in midweek. So, it's a tough run for him. And if that's 7 defeats in a row, then it's really hard to see how he stays in the job, because 7 defeats in a row at any level is unforgivable, really. So, be very interesting to see. I know where the fans lie. I think the fans all want him out. So it's hard to turn it around after such a heavy defeat on the road against your local rivals.
Absolutely. Perhaps the hammer waiting to drop for McCarthy. Then we move next to another clash between 2 local rivals. It was West Brom, Birmingham City on Friday evening, as Albion went top of the table for a few hours through Carlin Grant's goal, his sort of long-range strike, the only one in the game. West Brom second now, and Grant, I guess, Marcus, sort of finally proving worth that 15 million or so that they spent for him. How impressive have you been with him?
Yeah, really impressed. Obviously, the match winner against QPR in a West Brom home game a few weeks previously. So he's really been a difference maker, particularly at the Hawthorns. I think we all knew the ability that Carlin Grant had with his form for Huddersfield, earning him that move to West Bromwich Albion. Of course, didn't quite work out in the Premier League. He strikes me as a player at 24 years old that looks a bit too good for the Championship, but it obviously is yet to prove himself in the Premier League. A in-between player, obviously, we see Mitro scoring goals for fun. We'll get onto that later. But yeah, Carlin Grant hopefully can carry on for West Bromwich Albion. They're just solid, aren't they? Keeping so many clean sheets under Valérien Ismaël. And yeah, if you give the attacking players that platform, then a strike like that in the last quarter of an hour will do nicely for Carlin Grant. He takes the headlines, but it was an excellent defensive display. I thought Birmingham threw a lot at them. But yeah, Carlin Grant the difference, and he'll hope to be proving that more consistently this season.
Absolutely. As you say, Marcus, sort of another clean sheet. George, Matt Clark's return was key to that. Just how good was Connor Townsend, on Friday evening? He's having quite the season, isn't he?
Yeah, he is. And I mean, to be fair, I've been impressed with him ever since he signed for West Brom, really. I think it's from Scunthorpe. Did one under Bilic the first season he was there. Didn't look too out of place in the Premier League. But no, this season he's really come to the fore. And we saw how important wing-backs are in Valérien Ismaël's system at Barnsley. And it just seems, like Callum Styles and Callum Britton on the other side. And obviously, he took that over to West Brom. I think wing-backs are now very important in the sense that, they can't afford to bomb forward too much. You've got to offer plenty of balance. But I think Townsend does that. But I think also that left-hand side for West Brom, you touched on Clark there. I think Clark gives Townsend the licence to kind of push forward and not worry too much about defensive duties, because I think Clark, natural left-sided centre-half, hard to come by nowadays, really. Good at carrying the ball out, and you've got Townsend on that left-hand side. And I think on the overlap, I mean, we touched on Grant just then. I think that's probably Grant's best position now, the left wing, driving into on his right-hand side. And that goal came about from Townsend bombing on and allowing Grant to cut inside. And I think Grant's 11 goals for Huddersfield, 11 of his 19 goals in that season he scored, many for Huddersfield, came from that left wing position. So, no, very strong left-hand side West Brom have got. And Townsend's been fantastic. And, replacing someone like Kieran Gibbs it's a hard thing to do, really, ever since he left the Hawthorns. So, brilliant addition. And, as I said, a fantastic left-hand side. And you can see traits of Ismaël's Barnsley really coming into the display at West Brom this season.
Absolutely. Things seem to sort of click for West Brom, as you said. Not so much for Birmingham, who are finding things difficult at the moment. But as Marcus said, George, do you feel like, for 75 minutes, Bowyer's plans seem to be working perfectly, really? That they kept the Baggies at bay. They had plenty of chances themselves. Do you think they were a little unlucky there? And on top of that, 1 goal in 6 now for Bowyer. What can he really do?
I thought they were quite unlucky. Yeah, I mean they're restricted. And I know West Brom had a lot of the ball, but I think Blues restricted them to very few chances, really. And to be fair, the goal they scored, it wasn't as if they carved Birmingham Open either. It was a great strike, and Grant, made the most of a yard of space outside the box. So, but then again, we talk about Cardiff going to Swansea and almost not parking the bus, but playing for a point. And, you think Blues are probably guilty of doing that. I just think that, obviously they've struggled in front of goal recently. I just think that probably a change of formation. You look at Chong, for instance. They only played one striker effectively at the weekend. I know Hogan played, but he played more out wide. And I just think if you can get Chong and Bella out wide, and then, it's no secret that when Bowyer went in last season, most of their goals came from Jutkovic and, making the most of their aerial presence up top. So I just think if you've got players like him and Deeney, I'd play them as a front two, and I'd probably stick to a change of 4-4-2 and get Bella and Chong out wide and play the old-fashioned way, really, because at the minute I don't really see this 3-4-3 system working going forward. It works defensively some ways. It looked relatively solid, but no, I think that might need to give and play to two very good strikers. It's level strength, really, their physical prowess.
Absolutely. Well, a little bit of pressure starting to build on Bowyer then. And for our third game, we move to a third derby of the weekend. All eyes were on West London on Saturday lunchtime, and it was Fulham that sort of came out with the bragging rights. 2 goals from Alexander Mitrovic, one for Bobby Decordova-Reid and a late one for Anthony Robinson, sort of cancelling out their hope, QPR's hopes after Lyndon Dykes' goal. Marcus, a late burst, gave Fulham the bragging rights. Do you think that shows the difference between the two teams and where they are? Fulham promotion hopefuls, QPR perhaps more playoff hopefuls?
Yeah, just match winners all across the pitch at Fulham. They were so clinical. Decordova-Reid, obviously coming on after being on international duty with Jamaica, smashes it in the bottom corner, game over at 3-1. Just the quality of Mitro's goals show the difference between the two teams. I think QPR can hold their heads up high after the performance. They're competing with everyone in the league this season. 4-1 did flatter Fulham, particularly with the last goal being deflected as well. But just the quality of Mitrovic's goals, the takedown and strike for the first goal, and the header for the second goal is outstanding, really. He's not even facing the goal. He manages to hook it into the far corner and get Fulham back in front quite quickly after Dykes had equalised, of course. So that was big psychologically. I don't think Mark Warburton will be too concerned. I think, the scoreline exacerbates maybe some criticism that they'll get, but it was a fairly tightly fought encounter. Fulham, as you mentioned, just running away with it in the end. With the types of players they've got on their team sheet, it's not a surprise to see them doing that. They were just so clinical in the closing exchanges.
Certainly, Alexander Mitrovic sort of proving just how valuable it is to have a striker like that, sort of dragging his team into the league in that one. QPR, George, have got sort of informed striker of their own. Lyndon Dykes obviously caught the eye with Scotland in the international break. I think he scored 4 and 4 for his country now. And his strong form sort of continued for the R's. Just how impressed have you been with him, first of all? And secondly, that there's been a little bit of talk. Do you think that's a situation the R's should be worried about ahead of January?
Yeah, he's scoring a goal every 2 games on average. I think it is. I think it's 5 in 10 now. No, a very good player. I think he deserves a lot of credit for the way he's come over from Livingston. With all due respect to them, not the biggest club in Scotland by any stretch of the imagination, but came over to QPR. I think it was 12 goals last season. Again, really impressive for Scotland, which has only helped his cause as well. And he started this season really well when he's established himself as the main man. Really, with there's some great strikers at the club as well in Andre Gray and Charlie Austin. 2 of the probably the most lethal strikers we've seen in the Championship in the last decade. So a lot of credit. I think he's only 26 as well. Lots to like about him. He's tall. He's strong, but he can also run the channels really well. We're good at hold-up play. You look at clubs like even Burnley or anyone up there really who could do with a striker potentially, especially if Chris Wood goes. So no, very good player. And I think that if he keeps on scoring goals, probably gets to 10 before January or even more, then QPR fans are going to be worried. And I think also he'd go for quite a big fee as well because he's got a few years left in his contract yet. But that's not the point. He's hard to replace. So we'll wait and see on that front.
Absolutely. Certainly one to watch as we head towards January. And now for us, we're switching to our final Championship game of the weekend. Steve Cooper's unbeaten run as Nottingham Forest boss continued on Saturday as Forest beat Blackpool 2-1. George, you were there. just how good were they on Saturday? And is it sort of too early to talk about a playoff push?
They're very good. They've certainly improved. They made a huge strides of improvement since Houghton's gone. All due respect to him. It's almost like the shock has been lifted, and obviously the change of formation as well, I think, has been absolutely influential. These two wing backs, Spence and Lowe, have just been superb. The first goal at the weekend typified them at the moment. Dying out wide to Lowe, one touch, Johnson last man, and before Steve Cooper came in, these players weren't playing anywhere near their potential. So it's exciting at the moment, and it's proved that Forest have had a decent squad all along. But no, good performance. I mean, it's one of them games where you thought, even though when Blackpool equalised, you just knew Forest were going to get another goal, which I think is testament to the work Cooper has done so far. Forest fans were just lucky to score any goal before he came in. So I was speaking to you off air, Ed, just before, and I think it's probably a bit too early to discuss. I mean, it's been a fantastic start, but a bit too early to discuss top six at the moment. They've still got to play Fulham this weekend. They've got a lot of tough games coming up. Bournemouth they've already played, but other teams up there. West Brom away soon as well. So I think that'll be the real test and the barometer of how far they've come. But they've got, as I said, they've got a very decent squad, a good manager who's done well at this level before. So there's no reason why this bounce can't keep bouncing on, and they can't keep performing well.
Absolutely. Marcus, Brennan Johnson was one player sort of spoken about when Steve Cooper, who's obviously got that fantastic record with youth players, came in. He was in the goals on Saturday. Is it particularly exciting for Forest fans to see him sort of find form under their new boss?
I think so, yeah. They've got a youthful core going, as George mentioned, with the lone boys at wing back and Brennan Johnson just on fire at the moment. It's really refreshing to see just a confident Nottingham Forest after a real struggle last season, even under Chris Hughton, pulling away from the relegation zone, and obviously the way they started this campaign. So just to see them creating so many chances at will. I know it's only Blackpool, but they've started the season well. Is really positive, and just the relationships that they're building on the pitch as they just continue to motor on is really positive. They definitely could have scored more here. It could have been more than a 1-goal win. I think Lewis Grabban had a great chance to get a brace late on in the match. So yeah, no, it's great to see. Steve Cooper obviously comes with this reputation of developing younger players. So yeah, Brennan Johnson just keeps on building his own high expectations and exceeding them. It'll be interesting come January what happens with him.
Absolutely. And George sort of Marcus touched on it there. Blackpool, it's only Blackpool, but Blackpool have been very impressive recently. Neil Crouch said after the game they were unlucky. Would you agree with that assessment? And how impressed were you with them sort of in the flesh?
I kind of agree with how he says they're unlucky in some ways. I mean, they had a late flurry late on, but that was always going to be the case when you're chasing the game. Probably there was a penalty shot in the second half, which I think was, not very strong shout at all. But no, they were decent to watch. I mean, I think they deserve a lot of credit for the way they've stuck to their principles, really, rather than just come up and look to survive. I mean, obviously great that Jerry Yates scored in the absence of Shane Lavery, who's been the real, marksman for them. Really impressed by Josh Bowler on the wing. Thought he was a constant threat to Lowe and McKenna down Forest left-hand side. It was his cross that led to a bit of confusion to the goal, but no, he looks a real handful. He does. Very impressed with him. Same with Mitchell when he came on, really. But no, they're a good unit. I watched them a lot last year in League One, and I think they'll stay up easily. Obviously, it's a long season, but once they get Lavery back and other key players like that, I think they'll do well. But unlucky. I wouldn't say particularly unlucky. I think Forest probably did enough over the 90 to deserve the win, but they'll take great credit from it and the fantastic away following as well. So, still positive signs there.
Absolutely. Well, that wraps up our sort of review of the weekend's championship games. Don't forget, if you're watching, whether you're at an EFL game on the weekend or not, let us know your thoughts, your predictions. Any questions for me, George, or Marcus? Well, it was a sort of same old story for Sheffield Wednesday on the weekend, who threw away a 2-goal lead. Lee Gregory had put them in the driving seat, but goals from Guinness Walker and then Radoni allowed the Dons to sort of snatch a draw. Marcus, coming to you, it is becoming a little bit of a pattern here. We've seen them, I guess, throw away winning positions a few times. How concerning would you say this is for Wednesday and more? And is it all psychological, or is there something they can do to sort of try and stop it?
I think it is probably mainly psychological. You have to take the positives out of it. Obviously, it's gutting to drop 2 points in the manner that they did. But to get into those winning positions on a regular basis in the first place has to be seen as a positive. I think Plough Lane, AFC Wimbledon away is possibly one of the hardest away games in the division at the moment. Mark Robinson really has them with a never say die attitude. It's a great feeling around the club, obviously going back to their home stadium with fans at the start of this season. So I think maybe that could age a bit better as a decent point on the road if you take out the fact that they were 2-0 up. So yeah, it's disappointing, but I still think there's positives. Obviously beat Bolton last week and now picking up a draw at Wimbledon. And as you mentioned, Lee Gregory's form has to be a huge positive. There are signs that Wednesday are getting going, just getting their feet under the table in League One and started. They had a lot of new summer signings and they're starting to build an understanding and really get going towards the top end. I think even though they're outside the playoffs, they won't mind being under the radar at the moment, just going about their business. I think, yeah, as I said, I think in a few weeks' time, they could look back at that as a decent point.
Absolutely. And to Wimbledon, George, they just don't seem to know when they're beating the Dons, particularly as Plough Lane, as Marcus said. You know, it's obviously been a really positive start to the season, but their form recently has been a little bit shaky. So how important is this result, do you think?
Yeah, very important. I mean, they haven't won since that amazing turnaround at Morecambe away. I think it was 4-3. I mean, they haven't won in 5 games since then, but obviously a late equaliser against Burton and obviously a late equaliser against Sheff Wednesday as well. So there's clearly a lot of camaraderie there. I think it's noticeable that a lot of the young lads have played together. You know, there's a real team spirit there under Mark Robinson. So, as I said, they've been okay at Plough Lane. I mean, they've nicked a few late goals and cleared the fans make a difference, but they need to switch on from the off really. And I think they've only won 1 game at Plough Lane this season. I'm pretty sure about 1 or 2. But they've got some, tricky games coming up. Lincoln away is never easy, and then they host Wigan, and then they travel to places like Portsmouth as well. So. They take a great deal of confidence. They obviously don't know when they're beaten, so they've obviously always got a chance if they're a goal down or the chips are down. You can never rule them out. But as I said, I think they need to start asserting the dominance from the off really, and hopefully things should then improve for them.
Absolutely. We move next to our second of the 2 League One games. Well, Wednesday might have thrown away a lead, but Sunderland sort of came from behind to win despite a red card for Elliot Embleton. It was goals from O'Brien and a header from Flanagan for them after Danny Lloyd put the Gills ahead from the penalty spot. Marcus, something of a controversial red, given some of the comments out of the Sunderland dressing room. What did you make of it?
It's tough in this day and age when you go flying in like that. I think you have to get the ball or you're in deep trouble. The way the Gillingham players reacted, I think might have it's sort of convinced the referee that it was a bit more serious than it was. It wasn't that late really, and the Gillingham player who was tackled by Embleton sort of kicked the ball away, seeing the challenge come in. So I think seeing the ball go flying and then Embleton come in and colliding him with the player maybe does make it look a little bit worse, but I don't think he can have any complaints with a red card, to be honest. You have to win the ball if you're going to go in like that at the moment. It was a good result in the end for Sunderland. I think they'll be. I think they got away with it a little bit. Gillingham were peppering them at times. Obviously, Steve Evans' unconventional style. Get the ball into Verdane Oliver as much as possible. It was a tricky afternoon for them compared to where they are in the table. Sunderland really had to dig deep to win that game. But in terms of Embleton, I don't think he can have any complaints. It was a red card.
Absolutely. Staying with you, Marcus. Lee Johnson is obviously someone with a fairly good record, particularly at Bristol City, at sort of bringing young players through. Dan Neil was pulling the strings really for the Black Cats in midfield. Just how impressed were you with a 19-year-old against the Gills and just in general this season?
Yeah, it's hugely impressive. He's gone straight in as a key player, having been hardly involved last season, to be such a pivotal part of their promotion push this season. He's got a great relationship in midfield with Luke O'Nien. I think with him holding it together in midfield, it also allows O'Nien to venture forward a bit more often as well, and he can be a goal threat for Sunderland. So Dan Neil's been a revelation at Sunderland so far this season. I think Lee Johnson will be delighted with his progress. He's going to be playing for some England youth sides in the near future. So yeah, it's definitely a player to keep an eye on, and at 19 is so crucial to where they want to get to this season.
Absolutely, certainly positives for Sunderland, sort of multifold. George, you know, it's obviously not the result that the Gills would have wanted, but as Marcus said, that they were on top for long periods of the game. It's been a poor recent run, but perhaps, you know, we shouldn't get too absorbed with that run, given though, you know, those 4 losses have come against Wigan, Ipswich, Wycombe and Sunderland. You know, do we need to take a step back and realise who they've been playing recently?
Yeah, you do in some ways. I mean, obviously, you touched on they were quite impressive against Sunderland the weekend, but I suppose when the chips are down and it just doesn't go your way sometimes, you know, Sunderland have got real quality, and I think it's credit to Lee Johnson because it's not a performance. You know, when Sunderland go to places like Gillingham in the past, they've struggled, and you know, they've struggled to especially come from behind as well. So they show real character in that respect. I mean, yeah, I mean, they've been tough games for Gillingham the last 3. I think it's as you said, Wigan, Wycombe and Sunderland. But I mean, before that as well, though, you've got to consider that they weren't impressive either. I think they've only won 2 games all season. I don't think Steve Evans has been allowed to do as much in the transfer window in the summer as he would have liked. And there was a bit of, I think I saw on Twitter a few protests or a few off-field, I think an airplane flew over regarding the manager, owner Paul Scally. So it's not a happy camp at the moment, but they've got some winnable games coming up. So you'd probably back them to pick up some points there. But then it's one of them ones where you just need to get a win to stop the rot, really, or even a point. And yeah, I mean, they shouldn't take too much, you know, discomfort out of knowing they've lost to 3 of the best teams in the division at the moment. But you know, before that wasn't all pretty either. So it's I'm sat on the fence with that one.
Absolutely. Well, we move next to our 1 League 2 game. Tranmere continued their impressive run by beating strugglers at Carlisle United, a Rod McDonald own goal. Marcus, Tranmere edge past struggling Carlisle to go third. They've only conceded 4 goals all term. They've got one of the meanest defences in the EFL right now, haven't they?
Yeah, it's quite remarkable, really, to have just conceded 4 goals at this stage. They're looking sticking out like a sore thumb in League 2. You know, they've scored the 3rd most goals, but just because their defence has been so solid, they're able to compete inside the top 7. It's hard to really predict how that's going to go. You'd think something has to give. Either they start scoring more or they start conceding more. I think they definitely will start conceding more at some point. The 4 goals they've conceded, that has come from 16.9 expected goals against their own net. So that's a hell of an overperformance. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it pans out. But you know, in that position in the league, Mickey Mellon's done it before. I'm sure they'll be delighted, even though it hasn't looked convincing at all at times.
Absolutely. Well, I think we predicted things to sort of come on to sort of unravel for them a few times, and they kept pressing on. George, Carlisle United, when it rains, it pours. Really, you know, an own goal in a tight defeat to Tranmere. How concerned are you for them?
Yeah, you've got to be concerned, really. I mean, it's only Scunthorpe below them in the relegation zone, 3 points below them. But I know, obviously, outside in the goal difference, in the relegation zone on goal difference. But you know, it is worrying times for them. And I mean, they've lost 4 in a row, failed to score in those 4 games as well. So it seems the confidence is really low. And as you said, when it rains, it pours. And you know, he looks against you and with an own goal. I think it'd be interesting to see who goes in there as manager. I think John McGreal looks to be the odds-on favourite, which is a bit of a steady appointment, if anything. Did well at Colchester, but obviously had a nightmare spell at Swindon without really doing much. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I mean, they have got some decent players, I think, in, you know, Zach Clough, Lou Alessandra, but as you said, when the confidence is low, it's low. So winnable games come off. I think they play Oldham in 2 games' time, which will be a big game at Brunton Park. You need to be winning against teams around you in the table when the chips are down. So we'll see how that goes there.
Absolutely, a testing period for Carlisle coming up. Well, that's all 7 of our games from the EFL this weekend. Thank you very much, George. Thanks, Marcus. Football League World TV is not done for the day, though. Look out for the debate with Alfie Burns this afternoon, where they're going to be talking about who the best team performance of the weekend was. And before I go, just a reminder to like and subscribe Football League World TV on YouTube.